All right, let's just jump right into this explainer because we're about to completely shatter everything you thought you knew about Renaissance art, the birth of the modern eye, and, well, this whole magical idea of innate talent. We're going to look closely at exactly why true, enduring genius isn't some sudden lightning bolt of inspiration, but actually a grueling 10-year process of pure mechanical and intellectual mastery. So, part one, the myth of genius versus reality. We absolutely love the story of the lone genius struck by divine inspiration, right? It's romantic. But the historical reality is, frankly, a jarring contrast. If you were to walk into a Renaissance workshop, you would not find a 14-year-old Leonardo da Vinci sitting around pondering the mysteries of the universe. No way. You'd find an unpaid teenager sweeping floors, hauling firewood, and literally boiling animal hide glue. It was a gritty, manual trade driven by strict commercial deadlines, definitely not a quiet sanctuary for instant inspiration. Which brings us to part two, inside the Renaissance factory. To really understand how these teenagers eventually became the iconic masters whose names we still revere today, we have to step inside their engine, which they called the Bottega. And honestly, it was far more than just an art studio. It was loud, it was crowded, relentlessly busy, and it functioned as this high-stakes laboratory where optics, chemistry, geometry, and global trade all violently intersected. They were producing altarpieces, wedding chests, painted shields, all on incredibly strict deadlines for wealthy patrons who demanded physical proof of their status. And this manual, physical reality goes incredibly deep. Get this. In 15th century Florence, painters were actually bureaucratically classified in the Arte dei Medici e Speziali. That's the exact same guild as physicians and pharmacists. And the reason for this is fascinating. Mixing pigments was highly dangerous, super precise chemical work. So painting was seen as a material trade directly adjacent to pharmacy, completely grounded in the physical world, not just floating above it in some realm of fine art. Because of this, you couldn't just wake up and declare yourself an artist. You had to climb a rigid, decade-long career ladder. You'd start at the absolute bottom as a studio boy or a garzone, basically fetching water. Then you'd become an apprentice, spending your days grinding pigments. Eventually, you'd reach journeyman, where you were actually trusted to paint backgrounds on the master's commissions. And then, only after producing a guild-approved masterpiece, could you finally become a master and open up your own shop. What's brilliant is that this brutal training system perfectly mirrored the classical trivium of grammar, logic, and rhetoric, and this wasn't an accident. It proves a massive point for us. True expression, which is that final rhetoric stage, is merely a byproduct of first mastering the foundational grammar of your materials and then the logic of your craft. You had to absolutely earn your expression. It was never just magically granted to you by raw talent. Let's look closer at part three, grammar, or grinding the paint. So the crucial point here is that you literally couldn't skip ahead to creativity. You had to start with the grueling, physical grammar of the materials. Before a student was ever allowed to compose an original image, they spent years executing rote sensory immersion. We're talking sanding wood panels and pounding rocks into fine powder day after day. You had to learn exactly how the physical world behaved before you could even attempt to represent it on a canvas. To truly grasp the material science and the sheer global trade involved in this grammar stage, just think about ultramarine blue. This stuff was imported all the way from Afghanistan. Apprentices had to perform these grueling lye washes on the raw lapis lazuli rock, and out of an entire kilogram of stone, they would extract just 30 usable grams of pigment. 30 grams! This made ultramarine literally more expensive than gold, gram for gram. It was so precious that patrons even had to strictly regulate its use in their legal contracts. And on top of that, apprentices also had to master the chemical revolution of binders. See, for a long time, the standard was egg tempera, which dried almost instantly and required these rigid, tiny strokes. But as oil paint techniques started getting imported from the Netherlands, apprentices had to learn how to suspend pigment in linseed or walnut oil instead. And because this dried much slower, it allowed for those incredible, translucent, glowing layers of color that totally redefined painting. Okay, so after years of sweeping floors, boiling rabbit skin glue, and pounding Afghan rocks into dust, you might be asking this exact question. When does the creativity actually start? Well, that brings us to the next rung on the ladder. Part 4. Logic and the technology of perspective. Once that grammar of materials was second nature, artists graduated to the logic phase. And here's the kicker.
Creating depth on a flat surface was not seen as some innate magical gift. It was treated as an applied science. Following some earlier empirical demonstrations, a humanist architect named Leon Battista Alberti codified perspective in his 1435 treatise Della Pittura. He basically took a neat visual trick and transformed it into a strict geometric proof, a completely transferable technology.
Alberti's system meant that with just a straight edge and a compass to map out a horizon line, a vanishing point, and those converging orthogonals, any trained painter could mathematically reproduce three-dimensional space. And those busy, deadline-driven workshops, they seized on this algorithmic reasoning immediately because it allowed them to scale their production and guarantee perfectly correct compositions every single time. But the logic of sight went way beyond just rigid geometry. Leonardo da Vinci came along and actually systematized the science of optics. He observed atmospheric perspective and perfected sfumato, which is that beautiful, smoky blending of edges. It's honestly awe-inspiring when you realize these workshops weren't just painting pretty pictures. They were functioning as high-level research labs, generating complementary, cutting-edge sciences of mathematical and perceptual vision. Moving on to part 5, rhetoric, earning your masterpiece. After years of mastering the raw materials and that rigorous geometry, the artist finally reaches true individual expression. And as we've been saying, this requires a massive time investment. Just look at Leonardo da Vinci's actual timeline here. He apprenticed at 14, admitted to the guild 6 years later, and yet he stayed in his master's workshop collaborating for years after that. Even a mind as profoundly gifted as Leonardo's required over a decade of continuous hierarchical labor before achieving genuine, independent mastery. At this master stage, the artist really acted as a rhetorician. They were no longer boiling the glue, they were basically acting like CEOs. They used their hard-earned command of grammar and logic to persuade clients, negotiate complex commercial contracts, and finally develop a distinct personal voice. And crucially, they would then open their own Bottega to pass this highly repeatable technology down to the next generation of teenagers, starting the whole 10-year cycle over again. Which leads us to part 6, why genius takes 10 years. As we look at the lasting legacy of the Bottega system, this really is the ultimate takeaway for this explainer. The Renaissance teaches us that genius isn't a magical lightning bolt from the heavens. It is the manufactured outcome of a disciplined, decade-long apprenticeship. Literally every soaring masterpiece from that era was built entirely on a gritty, physical foundation of ground rocks, boiled glue, and the unwavering mathematical logic of the grid. Today, we're constantly searching for shortcuts and hacks to unleash instant creativity. But the reality of history's greatest geniuses tells a very different story, doesn't it? So I'll leave you with this. True mastery, the kind that actually changes the world, might just require you to put in your 10 full years, and perhaps be willing to sweep the floor first.